Welcome back to another episode of Modular Wild. I am Raul. This time we're going to be looking in a little more detail the relationship between clock and pulse width with the MH11 ADC Pattern sequencer by Fonitronik. If you're with us in kind of some of the basic demonstrations, we talked about how you can patch a clock into the input over here, the clock input, and then that will sort of get your sequence moving along. And then you can use the triggers to fire off, envelopes or any other kind of module that receives a trigger or a gate. But we didn't really talk about specifically the relationship between clock and pulse width because it's going to actually open up some doors for you sonically that you might be kind of interested in. So let me get the basic patch set up and we can kind of hear what we had before. I already have a few things sort of already set up for us. Over here on the left, I have the Z3000 pulse output right here that's going to be acting as our clock. So this black cable, if you follow it, is actually triggering the clock for the MH11. And then there's a second cable right here that is going off to our oscilloscope that you can see over on the other side. We're going to be using that to see what's kind of happening as we're going along. And then over on the right, over here in our sort of oscillator section, this is going to be acting as our sound generating source, the IntelliGel Dixie Mark I. I'm just taking a pulse wave out, but we might change up the waveform as we go along. Just kind of arbitrarily chose that. That's going into the VCA here, and then the envelope right next to it is going to be triggering our VCA. Output of that is just going directly to our mixer, and that's what we'll be listening to. So let me get the trigger and the CV patched, and then from there we can have kind of a starting point. So taking the CV out from there, going into the CV in right here to our quantizer. So I'm going to take the quantized output from here, our notes, patch into our 1 volt per octave right there. And we won't hear anything yet because I haven't started firing the envelope. So let me take the trigger out from here and then just patch it over to the input, and we should hear sound right away. There we go. And if I didn't mention it before, this is going to be relatively important. We actually have the Z3000 that in our previous demonstrations was acting as a VCO. In this demonstration is going to be acting as an LFO because it actually has a manual adjustment for pulse width, which is going to allow us to do some very special things as we go along here. So right here, this is our basic sound. Now let me just get the release up a little bit. Right about there, maybe. Yeah, so this is our starting point and our starting sound. So now if you look at the oscilloscope, you can kind of see the width of our clock rate, or our clock, I guess I should say. Now I'm going to manually adjust the pulse width and just have a listen and a look at what's going to happen. So I'm going to move it this way to sort of thin the pulse a little. If you look at the oscilloscope, you should see that pulse getting a little thinner. And you can kind of hear it there. I think we heard it a little bit better with the release over here. There we go. Let me try that again. So I'm moving back to the middle. So there you can see our pulse width kind of in a middle point. I'm going to make it a little thinner now. And you can hear it sort of getting more staccato. And then if I move it back to the middle, we're back to our kind of bass sound right there. And now let me move it in the other direction. So I'm going to move it. And you can look at the oscilloscope at what's happening to our pulse width. You can also hear what's happening as well. Going a little further. And at a certain point it'll just stop. and right about there it stops. So this can actually help you add a little bit more of, I don't know, vibrance or kind of excitement to your sequence, so it's not so static and sort of fixed all the time. Since the clock is actually varying in its width, the triggers that are being output over here are also varying in their width, which then in turn is adjusting how the sound over here is actually being shaped. So this is actually a pretty cool thing. So you can manually adjust it just like we did. So if you prefer, you know, that sound or this sound or this sound, you know, you just find the little happy place that you like. But since we also have the ability to voltage control pulse width on a lot of VCOs and LFOs via something like this, a pulse width modulation input, I thought it'd be interesting to see what voltage control can do for you as well. So let's go ahead and take the triangle right here from our LFO right there, our plan B, or subconscious communications, model 37. Just taking a triangle wave out, and we're going to patch it into the pulse width modulation. And we should hear a little bit of a change. I might need to turn this up just a little bit. And you should be able to hear that. Now take a look over at the oscilloscope, and you can definitely see the pulse or the clock is kind of changing. It's getting a little wider, it's getting a little thinner, and that's also changing the sort of the quality of the sound that's coming out of our synthesizer sequence. So it can just add a little bit of interest as you're moving along. And then of course you can change the starting position or the amount of modulation that you want to fit on your LFO or your clock right there, with varying results depending on what you want. But then I also had an idea when I was doing this that, you know, okay, this is adding a little bit of nice dynamic kind of change to our sequence as we're moving along. You can hear and also see on the oscilloscope that the pulse is kind of changing. So your sequence is changing, and over time you can kind of get a nice effect sonically, just so it's not so static. But if you remember back to the video that we did on the ADC part of the pattern sequencer here, you'll remember that you can also voltage control the pulse or the pattern control voltage too. So I thought we'd maybe take a listen to that as well. Now, in order for me to do that though, I will need another stack cable, because I'll need to take a, let's see, multiplication of our LFO signal. So let's try this out and see how this works out for us. So I'm patching out from there. I'm just going to patch into there with the stack cable, patch into the back of it right there. So we're still modifying our pulse width of our clock. As you can see over at the scope, it's still kind of changing over time. And now let's go ahead and adjust the pattern control voltage. Now we haven't sent any of the individual steps out to our ADC yet, so let's do that. And let's just make a few adjustments to find a set sound we might like. So now not only are we varying the width of the clock and thereby varying the width of our triggers, but we're also varying the patterns that are being generated in the MH11 pattern sequencer. So you're getting a little bit of both. And then, of course, if you went in and experimented a little bit more, you might get a little more, I guess, favorable results. Let me try that without this first, and then kind of get a starting position of my pattern. What's dial number 5 maybe? Okay, now let's modulate that. So the rate of our LFO over here is not only dictating the pulse width of our LFO and our clock, but also adjusting the pattern over here. Now, if you wanted to go completely nuts, or have even more control over this, you might choose to maybe get a second LFO involved that will adjust your pattern as you see fit, or some other type of control voltage that you can always input here. If this part of it, the pattern control voltage, seems a little bit out there for you, like you're not really sure what I'm getting at with this, do go back and watch the video that I did on the ADC part of the ADC pattern sequencer. But in a nutshell, that's what I wanted this demo to kind of focus on, just to kind of give you a little brief look more in detail at the things that you can do by adjusting sort of the dynamic of the triggers that are coming out, and that it can actually help your sequences get a little more excitement. So with that, I'm going to leave you this time. Hopefully you can stay tuned for the next demo on this special module. What I'll be doing is sort of going through some of the bit crushing capabilities that you can produce with the MH11 pattern sequencer. So I do invite you to stay for that. Hopefully you found this video useful. Please, as always, leave any feedback that you have on the YouTube page or on the channel page for Modular Wild. And don't forget about my other show, Raul's World of Synths. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.